You remember things.
Absolutely. And we're
Good
live.
evening, everyone. Welcome along to the Blether tonight. Our guest tonight is currently selecting a dram. He didn't read the full instructions on the email, so he's now rushing off to select a dram. You should hopefully all know who is with us tonight. So get your comments in. Let us know what you're drinking. Any of you guys who have the Blether packs, dram number 5, I think, if we were going in order, was the Glencadam single cask 15-year-old, which was released especially for the Whisky Shop. And I've just realised the first flaw of having the blurred background is the labels go blurry when you put them on screen. So that's in my glass tonight to start with. I am going quite easy tonight because we have. I'm doing a tour tomorrow, so I'll be driving early on. So I'm going to take it easy on the drams tonight, but that doesn't mean we have to go easy on the banter. So get the questions in, and let's have some fun. Russell, what's in your dram tonight?
Okay, so talking about memos, I didn't read the memo, which everyone watching will see and understand once Christopher joins us. There's another memo tonight that I didn't read, so I'm missing an item of clothing. But I'm on the Glenmurray, the handful, the port cask that I picked up at the distillery a couple of months ago. So yeah, I'm not hugely porty, but I thought give it another go and see how we got on with that tonight. So that's my dram, and I've got a little wee John Smith's to chase it down with as well. So.
Oh, nice, good stuff. Good evening, Alistair. First one on the show tonight. Dave and Phil must be having a night off, are they?
Must be busy working, yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. We are late, so they've maybe given up. They maybe had it.
Maybe thought we're not.
So we've got something else to do. Tobias, it certainly is possible to send Blether packs to Germany. Absolutely, we can do that. So we were just about to rejig the Blether packs. So we will still have the Tweedale 20-year-old Master Days Blether last week, the Glencadam, and I think we have the McMira
Stalin Lagret.
Yeah, which was our UK exclusive, or we were the UK exclusive retailer. So that's certainly on there. So we have to look at who's coming in March to get the next 3 drams ready. So without further ado, let's bring on our guest tonight. Is Christopher Coates, the editor of Whisky Magazine, and always the moment of truth, nice and easy, nice and smooth.
Hey!
Good evening, Christopher. How are you?
I'm very well, and pleased that I wore the regulation clothing for this interview.
Oh, I'm never going to live this down.
Dear me, and I have managed to successfully choose a dram as well. You'd think it would be easier, but I think it gets harder the more bottles you have to hand. Then it's a bit like browsing on Netflix. You spend as long or longer deciding what tonight, and it's oh, now it's bedtime. So.
With added pressure tonight as well. You were kind of thrown in.
Exactly. Am I going to be judged on which dram? I was thinking, oh gosh. No, it's always good. It really is. Sometimes because I spend so much time nosing and tasting things blind and thinking about it for work, that when it actually comes to be like, right, what on earth do I actually want to drink? Because I'm meant to be enjoying it and not working. It takes a while to get the cogs whirring, and it's you're very lucky I didn't end up with some mezcal or or rum or tequila or something. Wrong category.
That's absolutely okay. It's something we might have to look at as well. As we've had gin guests, I suppose. Or we haven't had somebody from the mezcal or tequila or brandy or sherry. We had Annie Manson as well.
We've had rum. Jim Ashley.
Yeah. So let's get on the hunt for a tequila maker and get them on board, because obviously with Whisky Magazine you're not just focused on whiskey. You've also branched out into there's the gin magazine, and then you've also got other spirits in there as well. So
yeah, so I mean, I can give you if you'd like, I can give you the sort of potted, the potted company bit if you want, which is pretty much the company I work for was called Paragraph, and we're a drinks media business. So we have Whisky Magazine, and Whisky Magazine was like the original child of the company, and has been going for 24 years now, because the company is about to have its 25th anniversary. And from there it branched out into, well, some people might have heard of this little it's very small little whiskey show company called Whiskey Live. So it was originally Whisky Magazine Live, back in the day. So that was the sort of the magazine grew arms and legs. There was that. And then from that came the World Whiskies Awards, which is the competition, the results of the regional results of which have just been announced recently, and the global results of which are going to get announced at the end of March. So that sort of happened, but not being one to stick to one category. Our boss said, well, actually, if this works for whiskey, let's look at other things. So we have, as you say, we've got Gin Magazine, which has the World Gin Awards, and Gin Live, which launched in Tokyo originally, of all places, and then we also have Rum Magazine, and then more recently one called American Whisky Magazine, which you might not guess what it's about. It's about this stuff called American whiskey, which we do, and I am still allowed to write about it in Whisky Magazine, but that one's just purely dedicated to whiskey made actually in the United States, not actually all of America.
Okay.
but yeah, there we go.
There you go. And so after was it today you had the article out about the English Whiskey Guild? So are we going to be looking at an English whiskey magazine sometime soon?
Well, honestly, who knows? I mean, it depends if they keep opening distilleries. Maybe we'll need one. I mean, it's funny, before, even when I first joined the company 8 years ago, it was easier to sort of know what you were going to write about in Whisky Magazine. You were going to have sort of about half of what was going on in the world was probably Scotch whiskey. Most of the other half was probably American whiskey, and then there was some Japanese and a bit of everything else. Australia as well. Whereas now, every time we update our maps or the information or like the articles we have about particular regions of the world, I mean, you're just sort of having to add dots on maps at the moment. I think we did Japan recently, and I think that was up to 38, 39 dots on the map, and we only include distilleries that are actually distilling, active. We don't include applications and ideas and pipe dreams and things. So between Japan and Australia, you've probably got 2 more magazines over there just to keep up to date with what they're doing.
Exactly. Yeah. What's England up to now? Is it 12 active?
Sorry, where?
In England, is it 12 active distilleries?
So let me think. So I can tell you based on the number of board members. I think they said there's 16 members of the guild.
But there's 12 members, I think. Is it?
Yes, it's 16 members of the guild, and then but not everybody is a member of a guild that's distilling. So
yeah. So there's a few
yes,
more.
I mean, again, I can't keep up. Honestly, it's fascinating to see this all sort of come about, and what those regulations end up as will obviously shape what comes out of our neighbours to the south for forevermore.
Quite innovative, haven't they? With the try not to restrict themselves just to oak was one that kind of stood out for me. That's an interesting one.
Yeah, and it's and that's a whole other debate to have. Is the taste of oak part of what makes whiskey a whiskey?
Yeah.
That's a question that I'm sure far more intelligent people than me will try to answer one day.
I think that falls into the chill filtering and the terroir debate, that those who do it say yes, those who don't say no, or vice versa, whatever kind of side of the argument you're on, isn't it?
No, exactly. And I mean, the other one that's been giving me headaches actually on the World Whiskies Awards side to things, because we review the category definitions every year, is around single malt. So I think not that long ago, you could have asked somebody, well, what is a single malt? And they would have gone, oh, well, it's 100% malted barley. It comes from one distillery, and it's at least double distilled in copper pots. And I think a lot of people around the world would have gone, okay, yeah, that's fine. But now we're having whiskies submitted to us that are only distilled once. You know, they have a still setup that allows them to throw in the wash, and they get high strength spirit out of it, and it goes through. You know, it's one batch that goes through and comes off in the still. We've got other people who are doing 100% malted barley mashes purely through column stills, and they want to call it single malt because they're going, well, it's from one distillery, and it's 100% malted barley. Therefore, it's single malt.
Like Loch Lomond with their single grain. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. So it's and it's happening. It's going from sort of an email every 6 months to an email, you know, once a quarter, to an email every week from someone saying, "Why can't I enter this?" or "Can I enter that?"
And are these small? Are these distilleries in Scotland, or are these other countries saying because obviously they'll have their own rules?
Yeah, it's mostly other countries, and it's not that they're not allowed to make it locally usually, but it's more about whether we would accept it into the into the judging category, and sometimes at the moment, for instance, we don't. You know, it has to be at least double distilled in copper pots to be considered in the single malt category, and that's definitely comes about out of a desire to make sure that you're comparing like with like. But we'll see what happens. I know that I've had, as soon as I mentioned that about a few months back, I received, you know, a slew of emails from people saying, "But you must taste our column malt," which was very, very nice. And the debate that needs to be had is, okay, but is it single malt?
You maybe need to have a miscellaneous judging section. Odds and sods. Yeah,
exactly. Other stuff that tastes good, but we don't know what it is.
I think you just nailed it there. The column malt. There you go. A column malt category could be in there.
And then we'd get called from people saying, "Well, we don't use a column still. We have like a hybrid, you know, a weird hybrid still, or I don't know, maybe we need an I still I still distilled category."
yeah. Because there are people doing whiskey in ice stills now, but they're putting copper kind of plating inside, aren't they, to get that purification?
Or not, as some of them I've seen have been doing. You know, there's definitely a couple of people out there that are distilling what they are calling whiskey, and it's not touching copper at all. So it's which is interesting.
Yes.
Yeah. I suppose it's in a way a compliment to the industry that there's so many people trying it, or trying to get onto the craft wagon and maybe not being able to afford the huge copper still. I mean, it doesn't have to be huge copper stills, does it? That we see in all the postcards and in tour guides and all that. You can get relatively small copper stills, but people just trying to get into the game.
Well, and I think that's what's interesting is there's two routes into it, and the one that most people seem to go for is the you know, let's buy a tiny still or something and start small. But I really feel for them because it's quite difficult to scale up from that. Because you know, if you're producing tiny, you know, if you have to do a week of distillations on your tiny still to fill one cask, you know, that's going to mean that even if people really like what you're tasting, scaling up and actually creating a company out of that's going to be quite challenging. I'm really impressed by the other way of doing it, which is what people call like the itinerant distiller method, where they go to distilleries that maybe aren't producing 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and they say, "Hey, can we borrow your distillery for, you know, a month? You guys all go off and sun yourselves on a beach somewhere. We'll make sure we don't blow it up." And they use the kit, but everything else is completely to their specifications. So I know we did a few articles recently about that way of doing.
I know that's quite popular in gin. I didn't realize that was quite actively happening in whiskey.
Well, certainly in the United States, it's I'm aware of things happening on smaller scales, maybe in the UK, but certainly all the examples we publicly were able to talk about were in the United States. And again, there weren't tons of them, but it's one wonders if there's more of it going on.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine many of the Scottish distillers feeling terribly comfortable about just handing over their pride and joy to to Mike and I, for example. Just
that's what we'll do, Russell. We'll nip up, we'll Billy Walker a chap at the door and say, Billy, go to Spain for a week. We're going to do some.
we're just going to be to Border Glenallachie for a week.
Send Mike and Phil home for the weekend. We'll be all right. Yeah.
Well, and it'll be interesting to see whether it becomes more common as particularly some of the new distilleries that are being opened actually have like micro setups next to their full size kit as well. So I understand that Ardross Distillery is going to have a micro distillery behind the distillery that people can effectively design their own. This is really aimed at consumers, but people who want to fill a cask of their very own whiskey can go and make it there. And certainly that model seems to have worked for I've forgotten their name now. Oh, brewer in Edinburgh. They make Radical Road. Next to the Nissan garage. Gosh. My word, that's terrible. I've been round there so many times and drunk their beers so many times.
The Stuart Brewing guys, I think.
Stuart Brewing, sorry, there we go. See, we got there eventually. It's late in the day. Stuart Brewing. So they've got a what I think they call it a craft beer kitchen.
Yeah.
And do that kind of thing for again, it's for punters rather than for other brands going in. But it's interesting to see that there seems to have been some success elsewhere doing that kind of model. So I don't know, maybe we can all have our own whiskey company and our own whiskey brand.
Sounds good. There's definitely an appetite for getting people involved and in terms of just different things for people to do. The gin, some of the gin makers actually, that's a great day out for people already. So if you were able to kind of expand that a little bit, I can think of a lot of guys that would definitely go and do that during the day and eagerly await their dram to obviously.
I think you would need a hell of a warehouse to hold everyone's.
Well, there's that, I guess.
For 3 years before they got home with them. Depending on the size of the cask, there might be nothing left after you. So, interesting theory. I suppose great to get people in and do the experience of the distilling and all that.
I imagine it'll be relatively expensive as well, because even on a kit that small, like the cost of the mash, just to mash in would be pretty high, and they'd obviously charge you for babysitting you as well, I imagine. So I don't think it'll be it's not going to be, you're not going to get a discount on it on your National Trust for Scotland card, I don't think. But
no, I think it's an idea, and as we kind of touched on innovation there. That's certainly a way that people could learn the basics in a whiskey school like that, and
maybe go home and do their own business. Because you do hear about some of the new distillers, and props to them. They just decided they wanted to make whiskey, bought the kit, and went for it.
It'd be nice to have that kind of cash just lying under the bed, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Exactly.
I think I'll stick to drinking other people's whiskey for now. That's
absolutely. Talking about, you never did tell us what you poured for yourself there.
Oh, I have some Ben Romach Contrasts Peat Smoke.
Wonderful.
That's what I have, which is sort of smoky very smoky Ben Romach. Although it's not actually very smoky because they don't tweak the cut points, I don't believe, for it. So it's higher ppm going in, but it doesn't come out tasting like Lefroy or something.
It's definitely farmyard Ben Romach, which is what I very much enjoy about it.
One of the first memories I've got of being at the shop. We've got quite a lot of friends who are obviously local to us, and the chap came into the shop, Stephen, and his dad told him he loves anything from Speyside. So he was looking around and he picked up a Ben Romach. Oh, brilliant. The classic Speyside, as they were kind of branded at the time. This is it. This is the best. Off we go. And about 2 days later, he came back and he says, "Why did you sell me that? It's peaty." He says, "You didn't say anything about peat. This is what you want in Speyside." And it's pretty much at the time was probably one of the only kind of commercially peated whiskies from Speyside. So it was like, of all the whiskies he could have picked, he picked the one.
It would have been that or one of the Benriach hippopotamus ones. Quindy, yeah, whatever they were all called.
So we never let him live that one down. He had the whole of Speyside to choose from, and he picked the one that his dad didn't like because it was the only. I think it still is the only consistently peated Speyside whiskey. Might be wrong on that now.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
well, you're probably right in terms of
I can't think
everybody
of
has a
one
go
off the top
to
of my
it,
head.
but yeah.
Everyone else does a week or a month or something.
Yeah.
So
Guys,
what was
if
it?
you know of any others, put it in the comments. We might be
Yeah,
wrong.
absolutely. Talking about sort of learning about whiskey and getting into, what was it that got you into whiskey? When would you have said you were hooked?
Well, there's two answers. So one, I grew up a few minutes drive from Glenturret Distillery, so I remember going there as a kid and really enjoying it, and hearing about Tales of the Mauser and looking in the washbacks and all that kind of thing. But I don't think that was really didn't get me into whiskey. That was just a nice experience. And my parents drank blended whiskey. They drank Famous Grouse in the house. That was what they drank. So the smell of it, I guess, I was kind of, or occasionally the taste of whiskey and Coke was something I was aware of. But the irony is that what actually got me into whiskey properly was a German person, because obviously you need a German person to tell the person that spent pretty much their entire life living in Scotland what proper whiskey is.
Probably true though.
Yeah. So I had a German flatmate, and one day he sort of says to me, Christopher, I bought this bottle of whiskey. It's called Lagavulin Distiller's Edition. Have you ever had it? And I was like, no. And he's like, oh, I thought you'd be able to give me an opinion on this whiskey. And I was like, so just give you context here. I was drinking neat spirits at this point. But what I was taking to parties was old style Sailor Jerry, if you remember, before it got very, very, very sweet. So it was still pretty sweet and spicy, but it wasn't quite what it is now. So I was into neat spirits, but you gave me a dram of that stuff, and it blew my little mind. And and a couple of days later, he took me along to the Napier University Whisky Society, where they have a very unusual way of hosting tastings, because they effectively give everybody a whiskey, or this was at the time, this was a long time ago. They gave everybody a whiskey. Everybody then just drank it and talked to each other about, who are you? Why are you here? And then at the end, when, after 10 minutes had elapsed and everybody had knocked their whiskey back, they went, okay, we want to go around the table and you each have to give it a rating. And they rated the whiskey in monkeys and chimps. They were their units of measurement. So they said, so you would go, I think this one's maybe 4 monkeys and a chimp. But there was no, it wasn't actually out of 10 or anything. So some people would be like, I think 10,000 monkeys and 0.3 chimps here. that was my first experience of a fun, laid back, silly whiskey tasting with absolutely zero pretentious. There was I don't know, maybe 30 seconds of discussion of, give it a sniff first before you drink it, but that was it. It was about having fun and drinking whiskey, and that's probably why I liked it.
Yes.
Yeah, we maybe need to get back to that, I think, in a lot of ways.
So. I like the sound of that, yeah.
The enjoyment of it rather than the let's evaluate it, let's tell me what you think, what do you know, let's drink it. Do you enjoy it? Yes, great. Let's move on.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree, because I've said it to many people before. I don't think there is such thing as a whiskey expert. Maybe that's my one controversial view is I don't think there is such thing, and I have trouble with people being described as such or describing themselves as such. I think you can be maybe an expert in maybe like Scotch whiskey history, or rare bottles of whiskey, or I'm an expert in mashing, or I'm an expert in condensers or something. But you know, saying you're an expert in whiskey is like saying I'm an expert on the universe. You know, it's impossible. No human can possibly do. You can know a bit more about a lot of whiskey than almost everyone else, but I wouldn't say that they're. You know, I don't think that's quite the same as being an expert.
That's very true. Yeah, it's a good point.
And no one person can say that this is the best whiskey available just now, because everybody's got a completely different palate. So what somebody's absolutely splendid whiskey is absolutely horrible for somebody else. So absolutely. Yeah.
And even a whiskey you like today, you don't like tomorrow.
Yeah,
well,
for sure. Yeah. And something you knew yesterday about a distillery, you forget the next day when you learn something else.
That's the astonishing thing that I've found, and I'm relatively new in whiskey. We've been kind of as a shop just over 6 years, and I had kind of dabblings in it before through the pub. But how much you think when you listen to somebody or you read something and you think, well, that must be true because they've said it or it's written down, how far away from the truth it could be. But you've got it in your head, and we're hosting tastings, we're talking about that, and telling people that this is what the fact is, and then you find out it's completely different. You're like, I've been telling people for years for this, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the worst thing. The worst thing when you realize the facts you've been telling people are not facts. It's absolute rubbish. It's horrible. It's a horrible moment when that happens.
It is, and I mean, and we, you know, the reality is, you know, we come across it almost every day because we have to do fact checking every day, and still make mistakes sometimes. You know, you can't. You know, everybody does, but you know, there are, and it's not. I don't think there's anyone ever like out there sort of deliberately spreading, you know, incorrect information. It usually comes from, I think, a good place, but there's definitely things where you can see. If you go, because the way we do our fact checking, you can see it quite easily. You can go back through like publication histories of different books and like trace mistakes back where people have only used secondary literature and haven't actually gone to an archive or something or collected the data for themselves. They've gone, oh, that was a good book. I'll check that. And you see these same myths about distilleries sometimes being repeated over and over again. And sometimes it's literally it comes out of like a typo or something, or just a oddly worded sentence that wasn't quite clear, or was, you know, it was kind of ambiguous. And then the next writer remembered it and put it in their book. And then before you know it, everybody around the world at tastings, you know, whenever they pick up X distillery, they say something.
It's just very much like Chinese whispers. I mean, we all did that exercise at school, where the first pupil was given a sentence, and then it had to go round, and by the time it got to the last person, it didn't even make sense.
Yeah.
So
is there a standout myth for you then that you've come across that was maybe gospel at one point and now everyone?
There's lots of them that are like very, very boring, like to do with things to do with. So there's ones to do with like dates of distilleries being open. So you'll often see, I'm not going to name any names because you could probably Google what I said and work out whose books I'm talking about. But there's like one of them, and I'll never forget it because it was one of the first ones that I came across, and it suddenly this fact sort of suddenly hit me. You couldn't just rely on these things. It was about a particular distillery, and it said, and this was the first Scotch whiskey distillery to be built after the Second World War in Scotland. And I was like, oh, really? God, that's took a while until somebody decided to build a Scotch whiskey distillery. And so I went back and checked a few different people's timelines and checked a few different companies' sort of websites and things like that. And very quickly, I'd found there were 3 other malt distilleries that had been founded before this one. But that pretty much variations on that sentence were in maybe 4 or 5 different books published by different people, all just, you know, it becomes sort of ingrained knowledge. But I think the more interesting one is, and the one that kind of fascinates me, is the misconceptions around sherry casks and what a sherry cask is, what sherry casks used to be, and how the sherry casks used now compared to what they used to use. And what really baffles me the most is, you know, there were people in the industry who knew this. This was common knowledge not all that long ago. You know, we're talking, you know, in the turn of the century, everybody in the industry would have known it. But at some point, somebody decided to change the narrative around sherry cask, particularly this idea that, oh, you know, lots of sherry was being brought in, everybody in Britain was drinking lots of it, and those thrifty Scots, they came in and saw a bargain. And it's like, also it's not just wrong, it's also like super deprecate, like self-deprecating almost, you know. It's like this, it's reinforcing this weird stereotype about like Scots being stingy, which I've never experienced in my life. But anyway, you know, it's like part of the cultural like mythology that, oh yeah, it was part of us, you know, just trying to save a buck, and actually we didn't give a crap about what cask we were putting our whiskey in, we just wanted it because it was cheap, you know. It's doing a massive disservice to the history of Scotch whiskey, and it's also just wrong. But that one, I find it baffling that still gets repeated at tastings even today. And also the idea that seasoned sherry casks, i.e. the kind like made to order ones, are a new thing. It's like, I've got books written in the late 1800s where people are talking about it. It's not new. And the same with like the idea of rinsing casks with fortified wine in the UK or in Scotland to rejuvenate them. Johnny Walker was doing that before in the late 1800s as well. So, you know, that's not new either. So it's just funny how these things get forgotten and then turn into myth.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the biggest one that we find is, everyone has to drink sherry so that we get more good sherry casks over. Bring back. I think I love the sentiment. Everyone has to drink more sherry. Yes, absolutely. But
because it's good stuff. Yeah,
it's going to be that much affected by us all drinking sherry, if anything. And I think we had this conversation around the other Blethers. I think if anything, us drinking more sherries means that the bodegas will make more profit from sherry. They might not rely so much on the casks they're selling, so they might lower the price of the casks. I can't see that happening. The economy doesn't work that way. If they're going to make more money, they're not going to drop a profit off another item. So
yeah, I agree.
But hey, sherry's great, so drink more of it anyway. You don't need an excuse.
I will drink to that for sure. Yeah, it is a funny one, but I think this is the thing. And it's also like, even though that particular, you know, misconception sort of frustrates me a bit because it's something I'm passionate about, I also don't get angry with people about it, you know, because I'm very aware that like the knowledge is beyond niche, right? It's like it's such an obscure piece of drinking information, even in the whole world of drinks, you know. It's such a obscure piece of information. And I think there are now enough people talking more correctly about sherry casks that, you know, give it another 10, 15 years and it's just going to seep into the people's minds sort of through osmosis.
Phil saved my bacon there, because I was trying to think what on earth the word was for the pack. I was thinking that PAX. But the Paxarette, he's saying, do you think that the Paxarette had a big impact before it was banned? And I remember reading something, there's a lot of the older people in the industry very kind of mythical, dewy-eyed about Paxarette and kind of mourning the loss of it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's I've spoken to numerous distillers and interestingly, people who worked in bottling halls as well, who said that they'd get orders through and it'd say, you know, these casks, you know, VAT number 3 max packs, and that was the instruction that they were to put the maximum amount of Paxarette actually at the point of bottling.
Yeah.
We're going to put your knowledge to the test. Ed Friday's come in with a myth that Dalwhinnie is the highest distillery in Scotland. That's quite a common myth. So do you know what is?
It is, and I'm going to say something. I'm probably going to say something stupid. I always want to say, is it Benrinnes that's actually higher up?
Yeah, I think Glenfarclas is maybe just slightly higher up than Benrinnes, just having been up that road a few times. But
this is slightly higher.
Do we know what it is? Is it Tomatin? I'm
waiting to see. I just did a quick Google on my phone, and it's saying Dalwhinnie.
It says Dalwhinnie, yeah. So it's again, it's funny. These like factoids, they're really good for a pub quiz.
I was going to say, depending on whether you're talking altitude or just height, I think the new Glenmorangie, Bill Lumsden's kind of playroom's probably the highest physically.
Well, yeah, he's just popped it in. I found it here. Brave Val.
Is it Brave Val? Okay.
Brave Val, near Tomintown. So because it's reopened, since it reopened in 2008, There we go.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, well, there's the proof for you. You can literally read about whiskey every day, be paid to do it, and still not know bugger all. it's just
bugger all is a bit harsh.
That's probably stretching that a bit.
and this is why I say, you know, I just don't think there's anything such thing as like an expert. You can't keep all that information in your head. This is why we've got notebooks. You know, and the internet. It's just sifting through the gubbins that's the real trick.
It must be tough as well having something like a monthly magazine, because things go out of date so quick. You know, you must have such a backlog of reviews and samples that you do. The whiskey's sold out or got, especially nowadays, before it even comes to the print.
Yeah, I don't think we've had, you know, even in the World Whiskies Awards, you know, if stuff is still not sold out by the time the awards are announced, you're really lucky. And it's the same with the magazines, particularly, you know, like single cask stuff. And I think a lot of the independent bottlers, particularly, they see it as, actually, we know that this review isn't going to sell these bottles. Most of the time, they don't even need to sell them. It's more of a like, they want to know when it's tasted blind, what do we think? So
yeah.
And again, a bit like we were saying earlier, I put in my social post earlier, you know, why on earth did somebody put me in charge of Whisky Magazine? You know, why anyone on earth would want to know what I think of their whiskey, or why they think that was important is still a mystery to me. But I'm very flattered, and it keeps the lights on. So
it's I mean, it's a great wee magazine. You must be the biggest whiskey publication in the world.
Yeah, certainly in terms of my understanding is in terms of frequency, and also in terms of, like, you know, we've got, because it's not just the English edition that we do as well. So we have partners around the world. So I'm probably going to get this wrong as well. So we've definitely got Whisky Magazine France, which is in print. Okay. We have Whisky Magazine Japan, which is online only. We have Hong Kong and Macau. We have mainland China as well. And I'm going to forget one. There's definitely another one. There was Spain briefly. And there's a couple of others that I think have done like annuals and things sort of under our umbrella. And the great thing about other people doing stuff like that is, you know, they do all the hard work and we just get to take all the credit. So no, so usually, you know, we'd work pretty closely with them on something like that. Although I won't take any credit from Whisky Magazine France. They do everything themselves, and they are legends, and they do an incredible job.
And I just noticed the latest figure. They say that they're still top of the tree in terms of buying in whiskey in quantity.
Yeah,
isn't it?
Yeah. Although I thought it was really interesting. The Brazil figure was in that announcement. I thought was quite interesting, and Mexico as well, because that's my stepmother's Mexican, and I've kind of been, because I've been traveling there for so many years. I've sort of always been banging on like, that market is ready for proper Scotch whiskey. You know, there were blends even like 10 years ago. There were like some of the key blends were out there, but you could tell, you know, this is a country full of people who drink spirits and like drinking spirits, and they don't all drink them mixed constantly. You know, they do drink neat spirits as well. And so it's, you know, you think, okay,
a good mezcal or a tequila is right up there with a good whiskey, I think, as well.
Yeah,
if you
definitely
get the right ones. I'm not sure if we're trying to get Ronnie Cox on the Blether as well. So he's got some interesting stories from Mexico and Colombia, and that, trying to get the Cutty Sark brand in there, and some of the things he's.
I've heard a few of those. Yeah.
I mean, so that would be good.
So maybe you could host that episode of the Blether from the Duke's Bar in London, which is where he likes to go for a martini. So you could maybe get in there and do it over a martini. But he gave me a very good piece of advice the last time I had a drink with him, which would have been before the pandemic, and we went for a martini, and he was like, Christopher, you know, you can come for one Duke's martini, and maybe if you're in company, you know, if you're among friends, maybe you can have 2 Duke's martinis, but you must never have 3. And I think I had 2 that night, and I could understand why he said don't have 3. because I would not have got home.
Yeah.
Alessandro seemed to do a very, very good job.
Yeah, that's my motto for the Gibson Martini is exactly the same. One is absolutely fantastic and just leave it
Plenty.
there. Yeah, any more is a mistake.
No, definitely.
Yeah.
It's although of course we're seeing that's part of, I guess, why we're seeing such a big rise in the low alc and low ABV serves and things, which are great because as anybody who's been to Japan and drunk Suntory highballs all day will know, is you can sit in the sunshine and you can enjoy responsibly Suntory highballs for as long as would be responsible, and as long as you remember to drink the one. I'm going to get this the wrong way around. There's a silver one and a gold one. One of them is quite low ABV. One of them is not. so as long as you remember to drink the lower ABV one, you can actually quite happily drink them, throughout a day, perhaps. But the stronger one, you don't want to get mixed up because that one is like 9%. And if you have more than a couple of those, you're not going to be, going to any temples or or strolling under any cherry blossom.
See, you're not long back from Isla. You were over in Isla fairly recently, yeah.
I was, which was lovely because being kept away was sort of horrid.
Yes. Yeah. So what were your highlights of your trip then? What was the highlights this time around?
Well, so I can't. It's like you don't have any favorite children, right? So there were no highlights. Going to Isla was the highlight. But no, that was great. I mean, I'd been 2 years not in not in any distilleries really, other than there was an exception. I filmed a documentary. Well, Whisky Magazine filmed a documentary at Glen Grant Distillery. So I had been at the Glen Grant sort of towards the back end of last year. But other than that, that was it, which is very weird for someone that used to be in a distillery sort of, every week or every 2 weeks. So it was lovely to get back to Isla. It was, funnily enough, the last place I went before everything hit the fan. Okay. It felt like, yes, it's over, back. But great. And what's funny about it is, I can't remember how many times I've been now, but there are still new things. For instance, I had never been in the Port Charlotte Hotel. And you think, okay, wait, how have you not had even had a beer in the Port Charlotte Hotel? Just hadn't.
Yeah, I suppose there's so much to do and see as well. And so I've been 3 times to Isla, and still want to go back because there's still. I haven't done the tour at Bunahab and I haven't done the tour at Colila. Both were under renovations, so I think it's important to always leave something to go back to.
And there's always
for
something.
That excuse to go back.
Definitely, and it's the same.
Well, I've not been at all yet, so I've got to experience all of that yet.
Oh wow!
Never been to Isla.
Love it.
Yeah.
Oh,
you'll get stopped at the gates. You won't get in.
Well, there is only one thing that I will insist on. Then, if you haven't been before, is please drive and take the ferry the first time.
Okay.
You can fly other times, but this is staunch opinion number 2. I'm on my soapbox. I think people should always get the ferry the first time because you feel like you've gone on the proper pilgrimage and you've like earned it. and you get there and you see the whitewashed buildings from, if assuming it's not foggy and you can see in front of your face. And that's my first trip out there. I was absolutely knackered because I'd had to drive to get there really, really early. I was getting the 7 a.m. ferry over, and I was absolutely just destroyed, and fell asleep on some of the like the benches.
Okay.
And then got woken up to the sound of all of these Scandinavian guys like whooping and cheering and yelling and high-fiving and yeah. And I was like, what's happened? It's like Santa's come. What's happened? What's happened? What's happened? And I think they just spotted Lefroy.
Okay. It's real.
It's real. Yeah, and you could have taken that scene, and that was children, getting to Disneyland. The same, the same happy, pure joy.
Brilliant.
Yeah, there's a few people talking about a road trip and stuff. We've mentioned it a few times, just filling the bus the shop minibus and just heading over for a week. So yeah, we absolutely have to do it sometime. For
Definitely.
sure.
It's,
No, it's
it's
well
an
worth it.
incredible place, and everyone, what I like about it is you could be driving, and you have to wave to everyone on the road past.
Mm.
For the few that you meet them in the pub, and they'll be like, "Why didn't you not wave to me?" Yeah, it's over me. Sorry.
And that's the thing. You know that you either get the so you get the Isla finger, which anywhere else would sound very, very rude, being given the Isla finger, but you get the finger. So some people, they drive by and you get the finger, and some people drive by and you get the sort of the hand up, kind of like the Queen, you get a bit of this, and then sometimes you get a full on, you get this.
Hand out the window.
Do I know that person? Yeah, I'd like to know how many accidents are caused every year by people going, "Who was that?"
But yeah, a road trip will actually, well, definitely. We've spoken about it. We've teetered around it, but it's one for maybe. I think this year, the places like Isla are going to be absolutely hoaching.
Yeah.
As soon as that restriction announcement was out, I know a lot of travel companies were just inundated with calls. Hotels, I'm coming. I'm if you got a room, I'm on my way, kind of thing. So I think this year is probably going to be absolutely great for the economy of places like Isla, Skye, all these new distilleries as well, which has maybe kind of popped up over the last couple of years. So
That's an
maybe
interesting question itself. I mean, do you think there's tending to be too many on Isla, or do you think there's room for more?
Oh, on Isla specifically?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I think there is. I need to give you a politician's answer. I think there is.
Just answer a completely different question.
Yeah, I think sherry is really very nice. I agree. No, I think there is probably a fine balance between developing any Hebridean island and growing its economy, and also keeping it in such a state that it still feels like that place, and therefore is going to be unique enough that people actually want to go there because it feels special. And then particularly on Isla, obviously, there's the question around infrastructure and housing for locals. I mean, it's hard, and I'm not saying it's easy to buy a house here. I'm in Leith, so you need if you want to buy a house in Edinburgh right now, you need a lot of pennies in the bank, but to even get a matchbox. But my understanding is that the prices aren't really that different on Isla, and there are, unfortunately, particularly young people who are having to make the decision of, do I abandon my family and my way of life and go and live on the mainland, or do I rent forever, or stay at home living with my parents, even though I want to get married and have children or something? And that's people, who are much closer to it and understand it much better than I do, will have to work out what the answer to that is. Because I see another application was just lodged this week, I think, for Ely.
Yes, Isla or ILA, isn't it? ILA.
Yeah, it was Ely, or something. Yeah. Anyway, you know the one I mean.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's saying that, of course, they have better road. The people can moan about the roads. They've got better roads than I do here in Leith. So they don't know what they're moaning about. I'd give anything for a road that does this.
Yes, absolutely.
And at least in Isla, if you're going relatively quickly, you can get some sweet air going over some of these lumps. Whereas here in Edinburgh, you're just you're more likely to drive into a pothole that's so large that it's just a giant pit, and you might just fall in, car and all, and never be seen again. So
in contrast, we have Campbellton, which is recently announced which has been very welcome, because Campbellton's been dearth of three very good distilleries, but what a great region to rejuvenate as well. So
maybe that. Oh, I'm debating whether I want to get on my soapbox again.
Jump on. Jump on.
That's what we're here for.
I am surprised it's taken this long.
Yeah.
You've got all the heritage, you have a workforce, you have effectively an entire town of people who've all worked in a distillery for at least one summer, you know, and a lot of them still work in a distillery, you know, 2/3 of them still work in a distillery. So it was all there, you know. You've got the people, you've got the place, you've got the heritage. I've seen a lot of people going, "Oh, it's logistics. It's very, very difficult to get to Islay. Sorry, get to Campbelltown. Or very difficult to get stuff down there and back." And I just think I don't believe it. I don't believe that it's any more difficult than anywhere than
It
you know
can't be
than
any harder than
islands
getting
and
along the
things.
Morven Peninsula to
Exactly. And you know, and I said, well, if it's really that difficult, we should maybe form 3 or 4 new Campbelltown distillers and get the puffer back on. You know, so you can get they can bring the casks and the barley in, you know, on the steamship from Glasgow.
Absolutely, because you could stop off in Arran on the way and do the 2 there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's I really don't quite get it, and I don't know if it's that people thought, oh, there'd be pressure to make sort of Campbelltown funk, and they're worried that won't sell. But also, you've got people who are like, we're not about tradition, we're all about innovation. So it's like, I can't believe that's an excuse either. You know, that's all you'd say. You'd just say, yes, we're in Campbelltown, but we're all about embracing the future, and therefore we're not funky. Which would simultaneously, you know, pull your USP out from under your feet, but also mean that you might be able to access that perceived wider
do you
audience.
think, or do you know that every one of these old distilleries had the funk?
Well, exactly. Exactly. Funnily enough, I haven't yet found any references to the exact phrase Campbelltown funk in Tatsuya Minagawa. Sorry, in Matsusaka Takatsuru's book about on the one that was recently translated from his original report. You know, you go through it and you get all these lovely little factoids about Campbelltown from while he was there at Hazelburn, but he doesn't mention the funk as far as I've been able to see. Maybe it didn't translate well.
I wonder what the Japanese phrase for funk would be. We'll have to figure that one out.
Maybe somebody can tell us. But yeah, I mean, it's he does say some interesting things though that are unintentionally funny. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to flick through it yet, or have got it in the shop, but very, very good. Translated by a lady called Ruth Hurd, who's a Japanese professor, so not a whiskey person, but from Campbelltown. And somebody was in Japan, went to one of the distilleries, saw that you could buy photocopies of this thing, saw it said Campbelltown on it, and sent it to her and went, maybe you'll find this interesting. And it apparently sat in a drawer for 4 years until she thought, all right, then I'll give this a go and translate it. And it was sort of only in doing that she apparently went, oh, actually, this is quite significant. But yeah, he says things in it like, there's a great distilling heritage in Campbelltown, and we have many, there've been many distillers, but they're all in competition with each other. But unfortunately, because of the way that, the economy is going and the competition's gone, there are sadly now only 24 distilleries here. So there's a few moments of unintentional humor in that book, which, it's quite surreal to read, actually.
Yeah, that's crazy to think that he was there right in the middle of the start of the decline. God knows what he would think of it now. Is it? There's only 3.
Yeah.
Well, and as you say, why hasn't something happened before now? I mean, they almost got to the stage where they'd lost the whole identity or the whole naming of the region. Campbellton whiskey very nearly disappeared altogether.
No, exactly.
Which would have been a disaster.
Yeah, it really would have been. There's so much heritage there that I think that would have been a great shame. And well, it doesn't. I imagine that now that we've got one new Campbelltown distillery, I'd probably be willing to stick a tenner on that we'll get another one. At some point, because
just 2 being announced. Yeah,
was it 2? Was it 2? Sorry, no, you're right. It was. You're right. You're right. I can't even keep up. Of course, because it was one. It was R&B, and then it was the other one. The next breath.
Yep.
So yeah, it was the same day, was it, or one day after the other? They announced.
Yeah.
It was one day after the other. Yeah.
Yeah. And then also sort of in the R&B one, because did you say you had Alistair on?
Last Thursday,
yeah. So I know that he'd always talked about having a distillery in the Borders as well, and I seem to remember that there was also a mention of a micro grain distillery in the Borders or something as well. So that again, that's going to be really interesting.
You'll have to jump onto last week's Blether, because Russell and Alice were talking about that quite a bit more.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's all happening. I guess it's just a case of timings and just all the usual due diligence you've got to go through, planning applications and what have you. So yeah, no, they're very, very, very excited. I mean, I guess initially the Rassay wasn't supposed to be on Rassay anyway. I mean, the initial distillery was going to be in the Borders, and then is it Bill, his business partner? I think it's Bill. Said why don't we go to Rassay, and then that kind of took off. Which is interesting that you see when you talk about the full circle of you, Isla, lockdown, and back to Isla. Our last tasting in the shop, actually physically in the shop before lockdown, was with Alistair and Rassay, and our first one back in the shop, physically in person, was with Alistair and Rassay. So it's funny how these things.
That's the universe, doing you a solid right there.
Absolutely.
Making you suddenly, for a moment during your tasting, you went, "Did I just dream the whole last 2 years?" It's all been a terrible dream. It's like it's like an episode of Dallas. Alistair Day comes out of the shower. What's that, honey? Exactly. Sorry, Alistair. Yeah, exactly. So
it's funny. We just on coming out of the shower, we had a conversation on one of the whiskey chats on Facebook, and somebody was asking, or Twitter,
the Tom and Tell or Tom and Tool question.
I saw that debate. I watched that with great interest.
Yeah, so it's 100%, and this image is etched into my brain, so I can never. And there was a lad, and I spoke to I think Cuisine for Teeth when I first mentioned. He told me the chap's name, who it would have been, but I was at the distillery picking up some stock, and I made the fateful slip of the tongue and called it Tom and Tool. And there was a lad sitting there, a bear of a man, and he just leaned over and he says, "Tom and Tool?" And he goes, "My name's Tom, and you just imagine me coming out of a shower. What do you think's the first thing I'm going to grab?" And I was like, "I hope it's a towel." You'll never forget I'm Tom in a towel. So I was like,
I like it.
So I'll never forget that. To this day.
You guys should be well used to, place names where you guys are. You should be well used to place names that have no resemblance, when said aloud to what's written down. So maybe you can clear one up for me while you're at it. Because actually, and I should really probably know this, because my parents did a stint living in Inch, actually. So I should so I should know a little bit. I should know this probably. But so Forg.
Yeah.
It's not. Would you call that Forg? Would you call it Forg?
Yeah, Forg's Forg.
So you would call it Forg. So because I was on a call and somebody called it like Foggy or something.
Oh no, Foggy's for Russell.
This is where I physically am in Foggy right now. This is where I live. Foggy is Aberharder.
So they misunderstood me when I was talking about. So I was talking about Forg, and they went, no, it's Foggy.
So Forg is between me and Glendronach.
Yeah.
Forg is about 4 miles down the road between here and Glendronach. I'm in Aberharder, Aberchirder, and Aberharder was initially known as Foggy Loan, short for Foggy. And then it became called, I can't remember, the town planners changed it to Aberharder for some reason. I do know it, I can't remember. But it was initially called Foggy Loan. So it's locally called Foggy. But Foggy, not Foggy, Foggy.
Okay, well, you've solved another. See, I told you, I learn something new every day. You've solved another mystery for me.
Because it's Aberharder or Aberchirder, people often call Foggy Chirder. So you get a whole kind of mash up.
I just love it.
You get cheese.
Love it.
That'd be a good name for cheese. I should make cheese. Call it Foggy Chirder.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say because probably the in our region, the biggest mispronounced one has got to be Glengarry.
Glengarry,
Yeah,
It's
sure.
spelled Garrioch.
Yeah.
Garrioch. We have some great ones there. Kat, who's watching, she works at the distillery as well, so she'll know. Probably have heard some weird and wonderful pronunciations as well. But the easy way to remember it, or retail people, is when the distillery is on and the guys in the town, they wake up to the smell and they're cheery. So you're cheery in the geary. So that's a.
I like that. I like that a lot. I mean, the weirdest mispronunciation I've heard recently, though, was somebody sent me a video of a I would say pretty significant drinks influencer on YouTube who has best part of 1 million followers who'll remain nameless, doing a video about whiskey tasting, and he takes one of these glasses and says, so when you're tasting whiskey, you have to always remember to use a Glencairn glass. It's the glass that always complains to the manager. And throughout the whole video, it wasn't a slip of the tongue. Throughout the whole video, yes, we love the Glencairn glass. And I was like, wow, that's not a, and it definitely wasn't an accent thing. It was, this is Glen, this was a Glencairn glass. And I was like, well, there you go. I've learned something else new.
I let slip on social media about 2 months ago that I'd actually, in all my years of drinking, had never realised that the Glencairn glass is actually on the bottom of the glass.
That means you must be drinking responsibly, right? It just means that you've always had a dram. You've not been drinking it too quickly. There's always been a dram in the glass. Maybe it means you've always been filling it up quickly.
I was like, how the hell have I never noticed that?
There was a TV show as well. It was quite a big TV show, I think, and it's got a wee clip on it, and somebody sits down and he's like 16-year-old Laguvulin or something like that. It's went viral. Laguvulin. Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, we're laughing about it, but it's. I'm just, ultimately, I'm just glad people are, drinking whiskey and enjoying it.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
you don't need to get it all right, but yeah, for those of us who sort of live lives completely saturated in it, it's pretty funny when you when stuff like this.
Some of the phrases or some of the names are easier to say the more you have a drink. It comes out, it flows out, kind of. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, exactly.
Easier.
Yeah, it's the ones that are quite like swear words or oaths as well, like Glentochers. The whole thing, it sounds like you're kind of swearing in your breath. And, Glentocher.
Exactly. No, it's good. It's good, and you try and get two people to say a thrusk the same way, and I'll pour you a dram if you can, because even I've heard people even in the same sentence, say it two different ways.
Guilty as charged.
I had a great thrice from a thrusk. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah. And it is, every time you say it to the same customer, you speak it, and they must think you're speaking about 3 or 4 different drams when you talk to them. It's like, oh, you have to have this bottle of a thrusk up in space, that blah blah blah. Och, Rusk, and if you just picked up a different bottle without me seeing, or
am I getting an thrusk or an thrusk?
Yeah, no, for sure. And the other one that I think, and again, you hear the same thing in one. From the same person in one sentence, they'll say it. So let's do this as well. Well, they'll talk about the distillery on Islay called Bowmore, and then in the next sentence they'll say Bowmore, and then they'll be back to Bowmore again.
I think the Islanders call it Bowmore, don't they? The emphasis on the more,
but not all of them,
right?
Because I tried to listen out for it this time that I was here. Now maybe it was incomers versus diehard locals. I don't know. Maybe that's what it was. But it did make me laugh a lot.
Well, the last 5 minutes has made me realise I actually envy you, the fact that you can just type the distiller and let. In your piece, whatever article you're writing, you can just type it and send it and let other people decide how they're going to pronounce it.
Exactly.
They're going to read it.
Most of the guys, we have to know how to say it.
Exactly. And I always tell myself that nobody's reading it anyway. It's just people are just looking at the pictures, right? Just need to get really nice pictures in there. And, oh God, if only that was the case. I mean, it is terrifying. You do, you send stuff away and then you're, months later get an email from somebody on the other side of the planet saying, so I read in paragraph 3, column 2, paragraph 3 of page whatever of issue this, and you think, oh wow, yeah, it's
Got to be careful what we say. Tobias is on tonight, so we do love our German friends, and we are very, 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 very friendly with Germany. But Stuart Buchanan, when he was on doing the Blether with us, I was asking him about Gordon and the fact that they both got very different sort of lifestyle. You know, Gordy's this kind of world traveller, filming wildlife, and Stuart's selling whiskey and, you know, travelling the world selling whiskey. And he says, like, you know what, I often think I'd rather be Gordy facing down a lion than trying to answer a question from a German at a festival. It's like, he's going to completely kind of put me on the spot. And I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm so sorry.
and that's the thing. I think it's I'm all for asking questions, but I really do feel for the ambassadors, because as I said, you know, you can even work for a company, be paid to work for them for years, and still not know everything there is to know about one distillery, right? There's your proof that you don't get and there's no such thing as a whiskey expert, you know. And I think, you know, I do hear it, you know, sometimes being asked questions that are deliberately difficult, not because the person wants the answer to the question, but because they know the answer.
Yeah.
You think, oh, come on. You know,
setting you up for a fall. Absolutely.
What was the mashing temperature on the 23rd of March, 1963 at 7:42 p.m.? You have 30 seconds. Yeah.
We had one of our local. We talked to Glendronach and Forg. When Karen McWilliam was the visitor centre manager or host there. And she would always kind of speak to the guys about some awkward questions. One group, I can't remember what country they were from, they asked what is the moisture content of the soil from where the barley was grown. Karen had a local farmer last, so she knew, and she told them, and they were like, "You just made it up." She was like, "No, shit, you know, I know exactly."
I actually know that.
Yeah, and she knew it totally.
So it's like, aha! Yeah. Not on my watch.
She made a point from then on and going and telling all the distillery staff, this is the answer to this question. You don't go out and tour unless you know this answer. Brilliant.
No, for sure. That's something that I definitely hope over time might change in the sort of whiskey culture scene, is that this idea of like information, or it's like, you know, and it's not everywhere, but I've definitely seen it where like information about distilleries and things is like to be hoarded like gold. You know, it's like, I know these things, you know, and you only pick them out of your purse of strange facts when you want to spend it, almost, you know, for social kudos or to make somebody feel uncomfortable. And it's like, no, like if you know all this stuff, you know, share it, tell everyone about it in your own way. And if you want to show everyone how clever you are, you know, start yourself a YouTube channel or a blog or whatever, and if you really do know your stuff, people will read it, and that's the healthy way to sort of express it, you know, not harassing tour guides.
I think the most important as well, but on the flip side, if you don't know it, you've got to be honest and say, I don't know.
Yeah.
And as soon as you start blagging, somebody will trip you up and they will gleefully do it. So, you know, it's one thing we always explain to the team as well, is don't lie, you know, because
there's a lot. I mean, despite drinking lots and lots of whiskey, there's lots of whiskey in the shop that I've never tasted. And if somebody says to me, "What does this taste like?" and I haven't tasted it, you've got to say, "I don't know. I've not tried that one yet." But going by the, you know, guessing, I would say maybe a bit like this or a bit like that. Let's have a look at what it says on the back, and you know,
sure.
But you know, if you don't know, you don't know.
Talking about trying to trip people up, Annette, who works at the shop, has put a comment on. We're talking about pronunciation. What about the Oxter dram? So I don't know if you must have come across at the Barrick-Row.
Are we okay with Oxter for a start? I mean, is that for translation for some people that are listening? So your Oxter is in Scotland is your armpit. just in case Tobias or somebody's going, what the hell are they talking about oxters?
I haven't heard of this one.
Have you?
Okay,
So,
right.
so the distillery is at Gairloch, west of Ross. They do the Barracrow gin, but they have an iron whiskey. I can't remember if they're actually distilling and it's in casks.
No, yeah. I'm going up there on holiday this year, so I'll know a bit more about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they had a Gaelic pronunciation or a Gaelic name, and again, it's like the Thrusk Badnachalech.
Badnachlays, yeah.
Wow.
There's like three words. It's like bad, na, and achlays with a dash in between. Bad dash na dash achlays.
I think I've got a bottle. So Russell, if you explain the rest of the story, I'll go and get the bottle.
So anyway, so Badnachlays, and I think it's one of these typical kind of whiskies that distilleries get made by somebody else. They'll stick it into some red wine casks, and just it's almost like an as we wait kind of job. Nice dram, nice little bit of peat about it. But there was a customer come into the shop and he went, "Oh, they really called it that?" And I went, "What?" He said, "That's his hairy oxters." I was like, "What?" He says, "That's Gaelic for hairy oxter." I went, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah." So I looked it up. So bad actually means thicket, and I can't remember what achlays means, or unkempt or something. So there is a kind of rough way that you could actually understand that it means hairy oxter.
But it's the shape of the bay is kind of the shape of an armpit, isn't it?
Is that okay? So that was that.
Yeah, it's a feature.
We also wondered if it was like a sort of a local saying for like hair of the dog. Are you having a hairy oxter today? Perfect.
I love it.
Get us a hairy oxter, that'd be lovely.
Love it. That's fantastic.
I don't know if that's true or not. So, yeah.
It sounds like it could catch on. Yeah.
I mean, it is just amazing, isn't it? There is so much going on right now.
Absolutely.
And generally the quality is pretty high. There's I think that people clearly feel the pressure that if they're going to do it, you got to do it right.
Yeah. Talking about the quality of the
young age as well.
Yeah, I was just saying a slightly different question from Phil in terms of the quality. So what are your thoughts on the increasing cost of whiskey?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Soapbox out again.
I'm not sure I dare get my soapbox out on that one.
There's two ways, because obviously things are going to increase anyway. It's just a fact of life. But we have seen things increasing above kind of the normal rate recently. So.
Yeah, I think both sides are right. So the people that say it was too cheap, the prices needed to go up, about some whiskies were correct, right? The fact, I've seen people get really angry, like about why can't I drink, Brewer anymore, and just knock it back, every Friday. It's scarce. People want it. It was probably far too cheap. Just feel lucky that you got to drink it at £40 a bottle or whatever. I kind of, whenever people moan about it, they're like, I used to be able to buy White Horse for £25 a bottle, and I used to drink it a bottle a week. And I'm like, get away with you! I hate you. That's stop your gurning. But then, obviously, on the other hand, you do have some stuff that is very keenly priced that perhaps shouldn't be. And I think and then there's like the third thing to it is the prices that are being charged in some parts of the world just because they think people there will pay it, and they're right, they will pay it. Which I guess is another conversation. Are those people being ripped off, or is that market being ripped off, or is that just the value of it? If there's the demand and people are willing to pay it, then is that just what that liquid is worth to that market? Obviously, where it becomes very frustrating is if that particular market ends up getting all the good bottlings and retailers in the UK, or sometimes even the distillery visitor centres don't get a look in. Then I think you've got a problem where the chasing the bottom line is outstripping doing business in a good way.
Yeah. And then at the end of the day, you have to, everyone who drinks whiskey, the consumer is passionate about drinking the whiskey, but the maker, it's a business ultimately.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
they
they'll make money.
and I think, what kind of really became prominent as we were kind of looking at opening the shop and kind of just as we got the shop going, and it probably happened before, but we weren't really that aware of it, is that the secondary market, the auction market, the flipper market, whatever you want to call it, distilleries are looking at that and saying that's the price that people are willing to pay for that bottle. So why shouldn't we charge that price? Or why shouldn't we go nearer to that price if people are willing to pay it? We're selling a product for £100. 2 weeks later, somebody's buying it for £500. Why the hell are we giving £300, £400 to somebody else? So from them looking in, I can see why they're using that as a business model to say, look, the market's there, people are willing, and it's slightly different to the fact that it's a different market that people are, being charged that because they're in a rich culture or a rich country. These are guys like you and me, who didn't get on the release, so they're paying extra. For me, that's what's driving. It's a shame, not a shame, but it's hard on us as a kind of the first point of people buying a whiskey. We charge as low as we can, and then 2 weeks later you see it in an auction site. Sometimes before we get the bottle in our shop, it's on an auction site going for. It's like how can that? Yeah,
and there seems to be some of it as well that's actually driven by problems with distribution. As you say, it's people who want it aren't getting it, but people who have created a business around setting up automated bots that register for ballots and click and buy things, and they're getting it. And I've definitely heard stories about new releases coming out and people literally buying cases of something to flip or to sit on, and it's those actors that are probably also driving. They're driving. They've got a good racket going on. Their own behavior is driving up scarcity and value, and they can sort of dribble them out. But equally, you see some softening of that. I mean, I'm not an auction expert at all. I watch it as an amateur. But there's definitely, it's not every expression. There's some brands that are quite good at releasing the flippable expression, but it doesn't work every time. There are some things that people were queuing for actually they don't appreciate, which is great because maybe people are going to drink it.
It wasn't that long ago I saw a Daft Mill in auction for £15 was the winning price, and it was kind of like, get it up you flipper.
Yeah, take that. I'd say I missed out on an auction. I don't very often bid on whiskey auction, but I did sort of think that I was going to bid, and then I forgot to before the auction ended. On some Yamazaki, so just regular at Yamazaki and some Hakushu. And I think the final hammer price at this particular auction, which I won't name, was like £45 each. And I thought, probably should have bid on that. Not because I wanted to flip it, but because I would have liked to drink it.
Go back to the reasonable, what are you, about £120 to £190, anywhere in between that now. Somebody
if you can find it, exactly. I
think the worst thing that happened for the online, probably the best thing for the auctioneers, but the sniper where the last minute bid when you think, I've got this one, and then you look back 2 minutes later and it's like quadrupled in your bid. You're like, okay.
It's a tough one, but I mean we'll see what happens with it. It's
I just always think for people that are chasing the sort of FOMO, fear of missing out bottles, is stop chasing them, because there's so much other whiskey out there that is very affordable, very drinkable, and get into some of the blended malts. Some of them are unbelievable for pennies.
No, definitely. I mean, there's one of them that that I tried recently. I'm trying to look and see if I can even pick it up. But the Old Perth, which I think they do Old Perth, and they do like a batch strength version of it, which I think is £37 or something.
Incredible.
and it's amazing.
Yeah.
Sherry, mostly first fill and second fill Sherry Cask Speyside blended malt for £37 at high strength.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
I'm not gonna say no to that one. You know.
And the good thing is, that's going to stay at that price. Or probably after kind of April, it'll maybe go up. I don't know, £3, £4 or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's still an affordable dram. You know, you
Yeah.
still look at that and think, why am I chasing a single cask 5-year-old Ben Nevis that's been dunked in a first fill sherry cask for 6 months at 90 quid? Like, I'll 3 of these, please.
And some of the stuff that Douglas Lane, the remarkable regional malts, some of the Douglas Lane blended malts are
excellent,
awesome. I mean, they're all nice, but I try. You know, I actually went out and bought this one because I was like, had a sample. Went, this is awesome. I want a bottle of it. Was the Epicurean ruby port cask that they did.
Yeah. That's the Lowland one, isn't it? Yeah.
It's so good. And again, you know, that's not it's not crazy, you know, crazy money at all. Yeah, but blended malts and even just blended whiskey is gonna be, I think, is gonna be really interesting. You know, pretty
I'm
soon.
not sure if we answered your question, Phil, but you certainly opened a debate that we've had on the brand.
Coming from Tobias, you seen that one, Mike?
Yeah.
But talking about the colour, yeah.
Since the first time I went to Scotland, it feels like questions from the German tourists got a bit more mellow, and the Scottish people started to buy the Coca-Cola coloured drams. It's tough. You know when you see a photo shoot coming from somebody like Alistair Walker or Adelphi or something like that, you can say that's going to go first, that's going to go next, and that was going to sit on the shelf for a wee bit longer than it should. And you don't find you not to bother unpacking or putting a shelf space for some of them because they're just going to.
They're never going to hit the shelf.
Go. Yeah. It's a shame. Not a shame because you're selling it really quick. It's great for us as a business, but the ones that are left on the shelf because they don't have that color to classic color. You know, they're probably colors very similar to this.
Yeah.
And they're just left because, they're not Coca-Cola. They're not really pink or port kind of colors.
Maybe that's a good thing, because maybe it means that people who understand that the refill hoggy can be the perfect choice.
Yeah.
You know, you can swoop in and get something that everyone else is too busy chasing Coca-Cola to appreciate. Not that I love sherry cask matured whiskey, but you know,
sometimes it's really hard to actually pick out these big heavy Coca-Cola types. Sometimes I find it's really hard to pick out any distillery flavour in there at all, and all you're getting is just this massive sherry hit. Whereas with other lighter, you're definitely getting distillery style coming through. And I mean, don't get me wrong, on a day when it's snowy and it's cold outside, there's nothing better than sitting by the fire with a nice sherry dram, and there's absolutely nothing better than that. But in terms of an interesting whiskey, the lighter ones are by far the better choice.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's just one of these things. I mean, the other thing that people chase is ABV. And I was guilty of it for ages, as you know, only really drinking, like for for fun, only really drinking cask strength whiskey or high strength whiskey, because I thought that's what you need to drink to get intensity of flavor and to get mouthfeel. And you know, it's just not true. You get you get high strength whiskies that actually they're almost hiding how boring they are, or how not boring, but like how not complex they are behind the fact that your whole face has gone numb. So you can only taste one flavor, for the next week. Whereas there's again, this is slightly different because this is cognac, but I got quite into Camus cognacs. I don't know if you've ever had cognacs from Camus. Their cognac, one tastes lovely in my opinion. I think it's delicious, but it has a really good mouthfeel. There's some this is a mouth coating cognac, right? And when I first had them, I hadn't even looked at the bottle. I just assumed oh, they must be bottling at 46 or 48% or something. They must be. No, they're all 40.
Okay.
They're all bottled at 40%. It's just that the way they make them, and I spoke to their cellar master about it. The way they make it, they do it in. They have processes in place that to do with the way they're matured. Well, it's all through the production process to do with the way they're distilled in the first place, then how they're matured, and particularly with how they're reduced to bottling strength as well. That, in their opinion, is what allows them to maintain this mouthfeel. And I was like, well, somebody needs to go. Some brands need to go and do their homework in your cellar, because if you can apply that logic to whiskey, and I think there must be people doing it, it would change the game.
Yeah.
How do you pronounce? How do you spell the Camus?
Camus. You know what? I have a bottle here. I'll hold it up for you. So this is Camus. Ooh, can you see it? You can only see Borderies.
Yeah, Borderies. Yeah,
it's tiny. So, but yeah, it's spelled Camus.
Okay. Camus.
Camus. Yeah.
Just look it up. Yeah.
That's them. So I definitely say, give it particularly their Borderies range, because they have the distiller's estate is in the Borderies region of Cognac, and that's sort of their thing, because they own most of it, and that's a particular terroir in Cognac, and a lot of that terroir goes into their products, all of their products. A little bit of it goes into everything, but a very high proportion, or potentially all of it, goes in. I think the Borderies range, actually, it's 100% Borderies grapes that go into it, and it has a very distinctive flavour. It's very, very tasty. But anyway, we're not here to talk about Cognac. We're here to talk about whiskey. So sorry.
We did the first.
We've had anything we want.
We've had half our conversations about cheese on this show.
I know.
But so the one I'm poured just myself was just talking about the French cask, was the tomato, the rose salts, reef salts, rive salts, whatever. We talk about pronunciation of Scottish whiskey. I've heard it called anything. This was probably my whiskey of the year last year. Or very, very high up in the list. It's absolutely astounding. And they released a cognac cask not long after that. I think just at the tail end of the year. Is there any casks that maybe aren't allowed currently, but you would like to see allowed?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not sure that there's any that I'm sort of desperate for. I'm not entirely sure I understand the logic behind the no cider cask thing. It doesn't, because I think from what I've heard, the reason it's the reason being touted for it not being allowed is because it's non-traditional. But so I called up some cider producers and asked them, was cider traditionally put in casks? And they said, well, yes, what do you think people carried it around in? Idiot.
Carrier bags or something.
Yeah, so that one again, I was whether or not whiskey should be matured in cider casks, I don't know the answer to that. But I was surprised that one got particularly singled out. There's probably more casks that I'm nervous about rather than ones I want to start being used. I've seen some very tasty whiskies matured in liqueur casks. However, they're very tasty, but actually they weren't very tasty whiskies, because I wouldn't have called them whiskey anymore. They're now sort of flavored malt spirit or something. It's the sugar levels go so high that actually because I'm a big loser, I had them sent away to be analysed, and the sugar levels are so high that they're not actually approaching liqueur levels, but they are far higher than you would expect to be normal in whiskey, really. Even in like PX cask matured whiskey, it's like blowing that out of the water, and you can taste it because it tastes like you're drinking whiskey flavored syrup, and it's very tasty. But it's again, it's like it brings you back to this whole question of, it's like, just because you can do something by doing that. I mean,
Yeah.
sure, do it, but really, is that whiskey anymore? So what is whiskey? And at some point, we're probably all going to have to sort of agree what it is. Because, before, eventually you're going to have somebody being like, I want to make some vodka and I'm going to stick it in a cask made of old paintings and I'm going to mature it for 6.5 minutes, and if you tell me that it's not whiskey, well, you're just part of the oppressive, you're just not innovative, man. And it's just like, I'm so keen on people that are passionate about it and doing new stuff, but it's like, maybe just call it something else. It doesn't have to be whiskey. If you really believe that this is a amazing product, it doesn't have to be whiskey. Just do your own thing.
Distilled barley spirit or something like that.
Just call it hooch.
Hooch.
So we'll see. We'll see. We'll see what happens. I mean, there's some really interesting stuff. I mean, the one that we're seeing more of is like koji spirit. Malted barley. Koji spirits that are starting to crop up in Japan, that are being labeled, not in Japan, can't be labeled as whiskey, but in America are being labeled as whiskey in the United States. And again, I haven't actually tasted one yet, so I'm going to reserve judgment on whether it tastes like whiskey or not. But it's
tough. I was lucky enough to be at the Springbank School in 2017, the week-long course there, and it was the week of the festival, so we got really involved in the festival, and they released a 39-year-old Glenfarclas that had dropped to, I think it was 38.9%, only 75 bottles of it, and they called it Healing Spirit. And because it wasn't whiskey, I effectively got a 39-year-old Glenfarclas for £75, and it was like, that's amazing, just being in the right place at the right time. And if that had kept, I mean, they could have, Cadden Heads could have easily married that with another cask and brought that up to hundreds, maybe even four figures. But they're like, actually, no, let's put it. And we got a taste of it at the weekend, and it's absolutely incredible. So that's one bottle I've still got in my cabinet that I haven't opened again yet. And every day I come home from work or home from a night out, and I see it, and I think, I wonder if it does taste that good as I remember. But no, I've refrained from doing that yet. But I think as well that's maybe a big reason why people are loath not to put whiskey on it, because the value maybe isn't there, the sellable value of it. If it's not malt whiskey, or if it's not whiskey, at least people won't pay the same for it, no matter how good it is.
And I guess that's why there's this debate, bringing us all back full circle to when we were talking earlier about English whiskey, about the debate around column malt and being admissible as single malt, or being labelled as single malt, and versus not. And I definitely, I know that there's at least one producer out there that has a load of column malt that they were planning to sell as single malt, and I can imagine that would be very frustrating if that was your plan. That one has to hope that, being a niche small distillery, if it's good, whiskey fans will drink it anyway, and because you're not producing millions of liters that you need to get rid of, it's going to sell anyway. But we'll see.
And then it's the if it's not an oak cask, the cask type has to be specified.
That's what I've been told. Yeah. So I didn't. So we didn't actually get full oversight on the document. We were told we were given details of some of the contents of the document, because until they've received feedback on it, and until it's sort of like, because then at that point, my understanding is that's when it will go out for sort of consultation and people can comment on it and stuff like that. That's when we'll get full details of exactly what's in it.
And I suppose from a product point of view, people see single malt Scotch whiskey and they know that is 100% malted barley, one distillery, copper, still, double distilled. They know that's what they get, Asian oak. when people maybe in 2-3 years' time, depend on how the rules are finalised, if you see single malt English whiskey, you will know that that doesn't necessarily mean those things. You might have to look a little bit further, because I assume they will have to be labelled as English whiskey, like Scotch is. Yeah. So
exactly,
that'll become the norm, that there is anomalies within that label that you might have to look out for yourself.
exactly, and that's the thing, is that, and I guess whatever, and again, I've not found ever found a room full of people that agree. Is it the same if you line up 20 different column malt whiskies, and 20 different, from all across the flavor spectrum, and you do the same with pot still distilled whiskies? Are they the same category? Would I be confused if I picked up one and tasted that, versus if I was expecting one thing, would I taste another? And I think what I'd really like to do is get a load of different column malts and then a load of different triple distilled whiskies.
Okay.
And maybe try those next to each other and see, is the difference still such that actually, no, these really shouldn't be called the same thing, or is it nothing to do with flavor and is it all to do with principle? Who knows? Not me, not this guy.
Let's do a blind tasting with a host of different styles and see what comes out on top. And yeah.
Well, the other big one that's getting people are getting quite angry about is there is more single pot still being made in the United States now, as in different ones. I'm not talking about volume. Then I think there are in Ireland at the moment, or at least they're giving the Irish a run for their money. There are quite a few pot still whiskies being made in the States at the moment, and they are really tasty, and they are pot still whiskies. If by that you mean something that follows our understanding of the recipe to make pot still, and that it's nothing to do with being in Ireland. But then every year, because it's happened twice at least at the World Whiskies Awards, we've announced world's best single pot still is this American Distiller's pot still whiskey. The abuse we get on Twitter.
Yeah.
That can't be that. It's not from Ireland.
So is pot still geographically protected? No, it's not.
No, Irish pot still is.
Yeah. That's what the origin of it is.
And that's a whole other thing, because of course there's a challenge to those rules going on right now, about what's allowed to be pot still and what isn't in Ireland.
Yeah, how much is it? Is it how much raw malted barley are you putting in?
And other permissible grains and proportions of other permissible grains. So with any luck, Ireland's regulations soon is going to look like America's regulations, where it's going to be, you need to have 51% of this, and apart from it's 48% on a Thursday, and if the moon is full, depending on the position between the moon and sun, you may use a recharred barrel at char level 3 on every third Thursday. It's going to be a bit like that.
Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it? But that's the fun part of trying to be more innovative and diverse.
But surely, I think sometimes a lot of innovation, sometimes people just try to be credible with what's actually there, instead of actually just saying, we're making something brand new here, and be completely transparent about it. It's not whiskey, but it tastes like whiskey, and we can't call it whiskey because we do this. Why not just face up to it and just say, try it, see how you get on, instead of trying to be something you're not. Do you know what I mean? And I sometimes think that a lot of these people that are trying to change the rules are just not willing to be transparent. And I think transparency is probably the key, rather than trying to change the world. Yeah.
Lack of transparency, and potentially a bit lazy.
It's everything. It's lazy. It's dishonest. It's
as well. There's the fear, maybe not the fear of failure, but the fear that it won't be seen for what it is. I mean, we have such a big gin.
That's up to your sales team. That's up to you. That's up to your branding.
That's called business.
That's right. You've got to work.
But we have such a big gin industry booming in gin, and now we are getting things like ODV, which is or botanical spirits, which are effectively gin without the juniper. But as soon as you mention, it's kind of like gin, but it's not. Like, it's not gin. I'm not going to buy it. and we have great spirits getting left in the shelf
Mm.
because it's not gin, it's not trendy, it's not what everyone wants to be drinking. Blooming great spirit, but people don't want to take that chance on something they're just a little unfamiliar with, or stepping into the new.
Exactly. And then on the other hand, you've got you could argue that that's your that's your USP, because there's so many people out there who love the idea of gin, but hate juniper.
Yeah,
hate the taste of juniper.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we'll see what shakes out from it all. But it's I mean, the point is, I think we could sit here for a good 8 hours or do one of these every night and not run out of stuff to talk about, which is lucky, because it's exactly that diversity and that degree of lots going on that keeps me in a job. So please, whiskey makers, don't stop. And people who are doing weird and wonderful and confusing things that make people argue on the internet and at whiskey festivals, don't stop, keep it up, because it keeps Muggins here behind his desk and giving me headaches.
Well, hopefully not behind the desk much now. Now that you can get out and about off the island and whatever. We'll have to get you up to Inverurie sometime for either the Whisky Academy or something that we can coach you in with.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure
and have another Blether part 2.
Oh, sounds good to me. Yeah, in person, perhaps, all in one.
Well, that would be even better. Even better.
I'd be keen.
Well, 1 hour 40, Christopher. You've kept us amused for quite some time. It's been excellent.
Sorry about that.
No, you've nothing to apologise for. Don't worry.
There's a couple. Sometimes we have the Blethers that we're relying quite heavily on the comments in the chat to kind of drive it. I don't think we've needed that tonight. Not that we don't love listening to the comments or watching the comments come through. There's so many that we haven't even had the chance to kind of touch on, such as the way the debate the Blether has gone, which has been great fun. I love that we've managed to talk about so much. And when we're reaching about the 53 minutes, I was like, is that an hour? I was like, oh my God, we're going to have to wrap up soon. But just naturally,
they started talking.
Well, I was worried that you weren't giving any comments because I've put everybody to sleep. Everybody that had logged on to watch has become so bored. Like, I'm never reading Whisky Magazine again, and never being conned into joining any live stream with that Christopher Coates ever again.
There's loads, especially when we're talking about the Campbellton and Islays. Gary Dunshire was putting in that a lot of the Isla distilleries are hiring, but there's nowhere for the staff to stay, and that's a big issue. He reckons there's 4 Campbellton distilleries in planning at the moment.
I'm aware of a third one, but I wasn't aware there was 4. But
and I think on the housing point as well, I think if you're interested in that, there's actually a really interesting article that Bruichladdich put up recently on their blog specifically about housing. So if that's something that people are into, I know that's kind of like another area of the hobby that not everybody's into. There's sort of like whiskey the drink, there's like whiskey the money making asset, whiskey the drink, whiskey the production, the mystery of production, and then there's whiskey the sort of socio-political force that has this huge impact on Scotland, the country, and the lives of the people that live, the people that live here.
The infrastructure, Christopher, you must, anytime you take a trip up to Speyside, all you see are lorries, either tankers or with the carrying casks or whatever. I mean, it's just everywhere, barley lorries. It's just lorry after lorry after lorry. It's just constant. Yeah.
Which gets us off of the environmental debate, but I don't think I'm quite brave enough to give you my thoughts on all that on a live stream. Maybe in the pub sometime.
Football and politics and that kind of thing are always never allowed in a live chat.
Absolutely. So just before we say cheerio, Christopher, you mentioned at the start that we have the Icons of Whisky global awards coming up, and just a little bit of bias from our own point of view. You guys are going to have to tune in because your local Inverurie Whisky Shop is in the running here for the finals. So if you could just tell us a little bit about when that is announced and how folks can get involved.
So So there is a big event, a big dinner down in London on the 24th of March, and that's where it's going to be announced. But the next issue publishes the day after, so it will be pretty much the 9 a.m. the next morning. The results will be on our website. The magazine will be landing on people's doorsteps, and there'll be things out in the world, the wonderful world of social media. So everybody will be able to get at the results quickly.
Excellent.
Never normally do plugs, but also, guys, if you haven't already subscribed, I get mine through the door every month, and I love it. Great magazine, fantastic read. Just the perfect accompaniment to have by your side all the time. Articles reread and reread.
Thank you so
and also
much.
A fantastic video interview with the man in the cover there, Mr. Malcolm from Glen Grant. Really, really good interview. If you get a chance to watch it, it's available on live stream, social media. I think via the Whisky Magazine page.
Yeah, website. So it's a full 40-minute film about Dennis Malcolm's life. And you'd think, God, there's not many people that you could get a full 40-minute film out of. And what a life he's had. I mean, I respected him before I went to go and make that film, and now having spent quite literally days and days just in his company talking to him about his life, both over Zoom and both at the distillery during the filming and things. I mean, I still know, it's like whiskey, I still know 1/1,000,000th of what there is to know about Dennis Malcolm. But what I do know is that, gosh, I mean, he's got my respect. I mean, what a guy.
Absolutely.
And you certainly capture that in the video. So guys, give it a watch. It's really fascinating stuff.
Thank you.
Just on that, we've talked a lot about whiskey. Normally the Blether is about you, Christopher, or whoever our guest may be. We haven't touched on your photography, on your filmography, any of that kind of thing. So it's geared up for
definitely for a part two.
Well, I mean, and certainly on the photography front, I mean, you've said it already. I love taking pictures of things. I don't know if people can see it. I can see my Instagram handle on here. I don't know if other people can see it that are watching. Quercus Alba. That's me on Instagram. That whole the whiskey photography side of thing isn't actually to do with my work. That's just something that I love doing. And whenever I go anywhere, I you see me and I'm like laden up with 30 kilos of camera equipment and tripods and giant lenses and tiny lenses and strange lights. And the good people at Bruichladdich were having a good laugh with me when I was there recently, because I've got some lights, for lighting photography that are magnetic, and because it's in the old maltings, you can stick them to all the old beams.
No. Yeah.
And it was the same in the warehouse at Bunnahabhain as well.
Yeah, I'm almost purpose built for that kind of thing.
Exactly. So so it's good, and they also stick to the hoops of a cask as well. So they're perfect things. So yeah, people don't just want to talk to me about whiskey. I'm more than happy to get nerdy about camera equipment and all that kind of nonsense as well. So yeah, but I'd love to come back and we can chat about stuff like that sometime as well.
Super, brilliant. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Nice for you.
It's been absolutely fantastic. What a great chat. Lots of opinions, lots of soapbox moments from all of us, I think. Brilliant. And that's what we want. We want opinions. We want people to drop the brand kind of thing and speak freely. So thank you very much for being a guest. It's been great fun.
Thank you. Well, I look forward to being back sometime, and hopefully, as I said, in person at the shop, in for a dram.
Yeah, we'll need to get up to Foggy as well. We'll get you along to
exactly. There we go. And now I need to hunt down that person that was trying to confuse me.
Point the finger at them. Good night, guys. Have a great weekend. We have next weekend. We have Robin Lang.
Next Thursday. Yeah, Robin Lang. Yeah,
Whiskey Bard. I don't know if he's bringing his guitar with him, but hopefully we might eke a song or two out.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
What a guy.
Yes, indeed.
He's absolutely incredible. What a talented guy. So join in next week. I wonder if we're going to put in one of his special drams into the Blether, actually, the Blether pack.
Well, maybe we should, yeah.
That might be an idea.
You can put it out of your bottle, though, because my bottle's up here.
Okay, guys.
That, man.
Thanks very much. Slanjava, have a great weekend.
Yeah.
Thank you. See you later.
Bye, everybody.